Part 32. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 314. Garen stood up slowly, turned around and looked at Zi Lilan quietly. The two stood face to face and didn't speak for a while. Garen quietly examined the Lilan in front of him. This is a very young and elegant young man. Not only his clothes are purple, but even the pupils of his eyes are dark purple. It seems that there is always a slight smile on his face. He stood at the door, closed the door gently with his backhand, and stared at Garen calmly. "Why do you look like this? Why are you so serious?" he asked in a gentle whisper. Garen narrowed his eyes slightly and said nothing. Lilan walked to Garen and sat down next to Jessica. "Did you have any bad misunderstanding about me? Although I don't know where I was wrong, I would like to apologize to you first." He took out a pair of purple glasses from his chest pocket and put them on gently, with a calm smile on his face. Garen's face was expressionless. "I wanted to know just now." "You were just dazzled just now, right?" Lilan interrupted. "It's common to have blurry vision when you wake up in the morning. Maybe you didn't get enough rest. It seems you know. Close the door and you can go out." "I'm going to start treating Jessica's condition now," Lilan interrupted him again. Garen twitched his face and stared at him. "Cure the condition? You know her. Can you please leave here right away? I need a quiet environment." Lilan's face remained unchanged, and she suddenly said loudly and unceremoniously. Garen felt angry and raised his hand to grab his collar. Boom! The chair was knocked over to the ground, and he picked up Lilan and raised it in front of him. Letting others finish their sentences is the most basic quality of politeness. If you don't want to abide by it, I will cut out your tongue so that you will always remember this. Garen stared at Lilan gloomily and said. "You'd better let go of my collar." Lilan pushed up his glasses and said calmly. "Are you threatening me?" Garen laughed ferociously. This feeling made him feel very fresh. It had been a long time since he had been threatened by others. He was always the one threatening others. Bang! The door to the ward was suddenly knocked open, and Gerda and Andy rushed in. "Garen! Lilan! What are you two doing?" Gerda rushed over and separated Garen's hand, putting it between the two of them. "Speak carefully if you have anything to say. Is there any misunderstanding between you two?" He and Andy, one held Galen and the other held Lilan, for fear that the two would fight. "I came here early in the morning and saw Galen in Jessica's ward early in the morning, sitting beside the bed and covering Jessica with a quilt. I was outside the ward and didn't plan to go in, but accidentally hit the door. As soon as I heard the sound, I saw him impulsively grabbing my collar. I don't know what happened," Lilan explained in a low voice. His words were not ordinary poison. Although he didn't say anything explicitly, what he said was that Galen and Jessica were replaced by a dirty character. It seemed that Garen came here so early in the morning just because he was alone and had some bad intentions towards Jessica. Imagine that a lithe girl who is sick in bed is alone in a room with a strong and tall single man. After hearing the noise, the man becomes furious for fear of being discovered, and grabs the finder to threaten the other person. Gerda and Andy suddenly showed a hint of doubt and looked at Garen. None of them believed that Garen was such a person, but they really needed a reasonable explanation from him now. "I just wanted to come over and ask Jessica about her condition alone. I also know a little bit about medical skills myself, and I wanted to see if I could help." "Jessica herself agreed," Galen replied calmly. He still didn't express his speculation that Jessica might be silvered. The silver transformation is now an absolute secret of the Black Sky Society, and very few people know about it. And he is also a little unsure. Whether Jessica has really been silvered or not, he needs to continue to confirm. After getting the deduction device, he also thought about whether he could silver the human body. After all, the Black Sky Society had studied all kinds of animals, so it was impossible not to study human body modification. However, all this still needs certain confirmation. But now, Alilin is obviously a breakthrough. It's just a misunderstanding. Gerda obviously believed Garen's statement. He trusted his friend, a man who would not be fooled by appearances. Although Andy was skeptical of this statement, he did not believe that Garen would do anything bad to his sister. After all, Garen saved his sister's life back then. If he wanted to get along with Jessica, now was the best opportunity. This matter was briefly discussed, and Jessica woke up and explained that it was indeed the same situation as Galen said. No one said anything anymore. It's just that the relationship between Garen and Alilin has obviously dropped to a freezing point. Because of Garen's relationship, Gerda and Andy also obviously distanced themselves from Alilin. After all, they are friends from life to death. After leaving the hospital, Garen was obviously not in a good mood. He first left a message in the mailbox outside the house where he lived, and then followed the underground passage of the War Guild alone back to his villa in the outer city. He already felt that history was deviating from the direction he knew and heading towards a track that no one could have imagined. Garen was wearing a grey robe and looked quietly at the huge circular hole in the backyard. The edge of the cave entrance is fixed with black stone, like an artificial guardrail, stably supporting the cave wall. That is the special mucus secreted by the two-headed lizard dragon, which can turn the soil into stone and use it to build its own underground palace. Garen was standing in front of the entrance of the cave, looking at the large hole that was 7 or 8 meters in diameter. Gusts of cold wind kept blowing out of the cave, making his grey robe rustle. The cold wind was biting and had a faint fishy smell. The cave is so dark that you can't see the bottom at a glance. Garen picked up a stone and threw it in. After more than 10 seconds, there was a faint sound of impact from the bottom. It only took a few days to dig so deep, Garen sighed in admiration. No wonder the two-headed lizard dragon can build a maze by itself. Galen clapped his hands, and a huge earth-yellow basilisk crawled out from behind him. Go in and take a look. Garen pointed to the hole in front of him. Hiss. The basilisk screamed in response, slowly and steadily crawled towards the hole, and soon disappeared into the darkness. The other two basilisks also climbed into the open space behind Garen. Garen looked at the two basilisks with a headache. Since he came back from the inner city, he just planned to see how the basilisks he hadn't paid attention to for a long time were doing. Unexpectedly, these 3 basilisks were bored and released petrification rays everywhere. Most of the entire villa was petrified by them. Walls, ground, trees, windows, and the bread that Lala had just made and put on the table. After a few days, many places in the villa were completely turned into grey-white stones. Petrification seems to be their greatest interest. Now let's see what else you can evolve into, Garen murmured, looking at the 2 basilisks in front of him. His sight sank into the basilisk icon on the totem bar. Priscost monitor lizard, unnamed, the first type of blue-backed monitor lizard evolution, the second form biological totem. It can be improved, and the evolution success rate is 34%. Potential points consumed, 500%. Abilities: Petrifying Gaze. Any hostile creature that looks at him will be damaged by the petrifying light, burrowing into the ground quickly. In the past few days when I went to the inner city, my potential points have been accumulated to about 30 points. Maybe I can try my luck. He looked at the petrified giant lizard lying on his left side in front of him. The spikes on this monitor lizard's back are thicker. Number 1 is dead. From now on, your name is Sijo. The teeth on the right end are more conspicuous. Your name is Dia. Garen randomly named the 2 petrified giant lizards. Let Sijo evolve first. His eyes dropped to Sijo's icon, and sure enough he saw that the name behind the icon changed directly to the word Sijo. Stay inside for 3 seconds, and the 5 potential points will disappear immediately. The entire icon shook violently. In less than 3 seconds, it became clear again. Come again if you fail. Garen's expression remained unchanged. In fact, he has vaguely discovered some laws of potential point evolution. Just continue to observe it now, maybe it can be confirmed. The second time his eyes focused on the icon. The icon blurred for a moment and became clear again. Failed again. Sure enough, Garin had a vague guess in his mind. Come again. The third time. The icon is blurred and continues to fail. The fourth and final time. Garin's eyes were fixed on the icon. The icon of Sijao shook suddenly and became blurry. This time it did not become clear quickly, but remained blurry for more than 10 seconds. Ouch! Suddenly, a roar of a giant lizard could be heard in his ears, and Garin suddenly turned his eyes back to look at Sijao in front of him. This petrified giant lizard was struggling painfully. It rolled on the ground, splashing dust, and its body was like boiling water, with blood bubbles constantly popping up. The blood bubbles quickly exploded, turning into pools of white slurry covering the skin. At the same time, his body size also expanded rapidly, from the original 4 or 5 meters to 5 to 6 meters, 7 to 8 meters, and finally 12 meters. The strong body also changed from brown to pure white covered with white mucus. The mucus quickly solidified and dried up, turning into pieces of hard and smooth scales, covering the entire body surface of the monitor lizard. Garin stepped back more than 10 steps before leaving enough space for the giant lizard to evolve. This originally yellow lizard, as if time was moving quickly, grew into a pure white slender giant beast at a speed visible to the naked eye. Similar to the elegant and beautiful white dragon in Western mythology, a pair of huge white wings like a bat sprouted from his back. His long tail streaked across the ground of the yard, making a whirring sound. Garin looked up at the white giant beast that was more than 8 meters tall and 12 meters long, his face also full of unexpected surprises. Howl! This white dragon-like giant beast has 4 thick legs, and its chest and abdomen have obvious bulges and extremely strong muscle lines, which bulge and shrink with the movement. His head and neck are as long as a snake, standing upright in mid-air, with a triangular white membrane standing upright on top of his head, like a shark's fin sticking out of the sea. 2 huge white wings spread out gently, fanning out gusts of wind from time to time, causing the surrounding weeds and trees to roar continuously. It lowered its slender neck and gently laid its head in front of Garin to show its submission. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 315. It's really surprising. Garin had an indescribable feeling in his heart, as if he was witnessing history and myth. The giant beast in front of me is exactly the same as the legendary dragon in the West. That's right. Look at the ability. Only then did he recall the most important part. His eyes quickly fell on the totem bar. Petrified white dragon, the third type of evolution of the petrified giant lizard, the third form biological totem, the ultimate body cannot be promoted. Ancient genetic information, this terrifying creature likes to petrify its prey into stone statues before eating them. They like to eat various high-quality gems or jade to improve their physical fitness. In ancient times, they were the most feared predators in the mountains and forests. The specific time of their appearance is unknown. They have a strong desire to collect, and they have an extremely enthusiastic hobby of collecting various gems, diamonds, crystals, and even powerful creatures that they have petrified themselves. Ability, Petrified Aura, can slow down the enemy's movement flexibility in a large area and reduce the sensitivity of their joints. This terrifying ability makes them not afraid of group battles. Dragon Skin, powerful dragon scales are immune to damage from most ordinary weapons and sharp teeth. Petrified Heart, white dragon has 3 hearts. He can use his breath to petrify the enemy, and he can also eject 2 of the hearts and use them as large-scale petrified bombs. Of course, this will damage his origin. The petrified white dragon is indeed amazing. Garin approached the white dragon's head. This huge dragon head was the same height as him. The huge dragon eye is black with a silver vertical pupil in the middle. He reached out and gently touched Beilong's head. It feels hard and cold. like touching a solid rock or a snake's scales. Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Garen suddenly had an unprecedented thought in his heart. If he is really the legendary mythical dragon, then will his blood also have the mysterious effect of making people infinitely powerful like the legend says? As soon as he thought of this idea, Garen suddenly felt an impulse in his heart. He wanted to try it out for himself to see if this legend was true. "Stand still," he ordered in his mind. "Howl." Balong growled lowly and raised his head, and sure enough, he stopped moving. Garen walked to the side of its body, scoffed and pulled out a short black dagger he carried with him. "I guess I can't break the scales myself." He suddenly remembered that attacks without the nature of the totem's light were ineffective against the totem. Perhaps the first type of totem can be broken with physical strength, but in front of me is the third type of totem. Immediately, there was a slight movement in his mind. One person and one dragon were waiting quietly in the backyard. Time passes minute by minute. Lala in the villa wanted to come out several times to see what was going on, but she always followed Galen's instructions and did not go out to do anything without permission. This girl was obviously extremely timid. Perhaps it should be said that he is too smart. She knows what she should know and what she shouldn't know. She was sitting on the sofa in the living room, quietly flipping through a historical fiction book, turning a deaf ear to the roar of the giant white dragon outside, but her fingers trembling slightly as she turned the pages. In fact, she already knew that she knew too many Galleon secrets, and it was impossible to leave here casually. In such troubled times, she was actually quite lucky to have one or two strong men to rely on. What was even more fortunate was that this strong man did not ask for anything from her because of his strength. She is very satisfied to be able to live such a life now. Soon, there were dull footsteps outside the villa. "The big monster is back." Lala put down the book, thinking to herself that she would inevitably catch a glimpse of the monster from the window. It was a huge piece of dark gray skin that directly blocked the window. The scales on it kept moving, and soon the blocked window regained its light. What kind of person did I meet? She began to guess unknowingly. She was surrounded by strange monsters and bugs all the time, and the entire villa seemed to have become a monster's lair and base. Only the man can come and go as he pleases. In the backyard, Garen quietly looked up and watched the two-headed lizard dragon running back from a distance. The backyard could not accommodate the two huge beasts. The two-headed lizard dragon had to knock down several walls before it managed to squeeze into Garen's side. Two giant beasts, one pure white and one dark gray, squeezed Garen in the middle, making it completely invisible. The two-headed lizard dragon was larger than the petrified white dragon. It stretched its two heads towards the petrified white dragon and took a sniff, as if wondering how this giant beast appeared. "Can I eat it?" "Howl." The petrified white dragon roared fiercely at it, gray-white mist faintly flowing from its mouth, ready to emit its petrified breath at any time. Garen stood in the middle, giving instructions on the relationship between the two parties in his mind. Then he quietly gave the command he had planned. The petrified white dragon took a few steps back aggrievedly, opened its right wing, exposed its strong right body, and brought itself to the mouth of the two-headed lizard dragon. "Laugh." The normal head of the two-headed lizard dragon bit the petrified white dragon's side without any politeness. Suddenly, large streams of white blood spurted out and fell into a small pit below. The small hole was quickly filled. The two-headed lizard dragon retracted its head and roared a few times in dissatisfaction. "There seems to be something wrong with my mouth and I feel a little uncomfortable." The petrified white dragon spit out a breath of gray-white mist on his wound, which instantly stopped the bleeding and coagulated it. Garen was currently squatting beside a puddle of white blood. He quietly looked at the white dragon's blood in front of him and smelled the strong stench emanating from it. The white dragon's blood is like spoiled expired milk, with foam constantly rising on the surface. These bubbles kept popping up and bursting, releasing large amounts of smelly gas. He stretched out his index finger and lightly dipped it in the white blood. A sharp pain shot from his index finger to his body. Hiss. The skin of the index finger quickly became tight. Garen retracted his fingers and looked at his fingers. The originally white skin had turned slightly gray, as if it had been turned to stone. It's so corrosive, Garen moved his fingers. Just now he took the initiative to remove the protection of the totem light and actually tried the effect of these dragon bloods with his own body. It seems that it may not be used now. Garen gave up his plan to cleanse his body with dragon blood. Part of the skin on the index finger was obviously petrified. Maybe dragon blood would be good for the human body, but it was definitely not the blood of a petrified white dragon. He stood up and looked at the dragon's blood in the small pit. In less than half a minute, the dragon's blood quickly solidified, and soon turned into a white, flat stone, without any liquid feeling anymore. What a pity. He looked at the two giant beasts next to him. Let's all go hunting and kill any monsters that may threaten our territory. The petrified white dragon suddenly roared, flapped its wings, stepped forward with its limbs, and immediately flew into the sky, flying gracefully into the distance. A subtle white halo seemed to surround its body. It flew higher and higher, flew farther and farther, and soon turned into a small white dot. The two-headed lizard dragon roared. Suddenly, the heads of two giant Fukasawa crocodiles arched out from the shadows of the surrounding yard, and roars came one after another. There was also the sound of dense crawling insects. These parasites suddenly numbered 30 or 40, beginning to look like an army of nests. Garen looked up at the flying white dragon, and suddenly felt the deduction device he was carrying trembling. He quickly took out the deducer crystal ball. This red sphere is emitting a faint silver light at this time. In the middle of the sphere, a line of clear writing is slowly emerging. There is a request for external contact. Do you want to contact me? Garen was shocked. Contact request. Could it be that there are other deducer holders around? He suddenly remembered that this crystal ball is the terminal used by the Black Sky Society to control the silver totem. It is impossible not to have integrated communication function. For the first time in Garen's mind, the threat that he might lose his derivation device appeared. He hesitated for a while, looking at the contact request. The contact request level has been upgraded to urgent. Do you want to contact me? The crystal ball changed its words again. The choices of yes and no appear below. Garen put on the hood of his gray robe to cover his face, then squatted down and dug out a large piece of stone solidified by the white dragon's blood. With his palm like a knife, he quickly cut it into a rough white slate, barely chipping it. It looked like a rough mask, and when it was put on his face, even his eyes were completely covered. After doing all this, Garen reached out to the option yes and clicked lightly. For a moment, the crystal ball slightly rippled with light red ripples. A deep female voice came from inside. I didn't expect that there is actually an elemental general presiding over Titan City. Those damn monsters didn't kill all of you. It's really rare. She paused. Aren't you going to speak? It seems that you are the legendary Jace. It's obviously him. I've found the bodies of Ania and Jepsis. It's really tragic. Tisk, tisk. Another joking male voice came out. Demaya, where are you now? I'm in charge of the overall situation here in Enid. Those monsters damaged the branch's lair. If I hadn't arrived in time, there wouldn't be a single person alive in the entire lair. I'm on Shanya's side, and it's very troublesome. But I can still control it. Where's your side, Jace? Your place is the key point, and the Grand Duke of White Dragon Eagle is not that easy to deal with. Medea asked Garen. Me, with a thought in his heart, Garen responded in a low voice. It's not bad. Everything is fine. It's going well. It's just that most of my men are dead, he replied in a hoarse and weird voice on purpose. What's wrong with your voice? Medea was a little confused. My throat was injured. It took me a long time to recover, Garen replied calmly. The current situation is like this. I have only contacted 11 generals in Dongzhou. Now according to the similar regions, the three of us are grouped together, Media explained simply. Originally I didn't want to contact you, but now an emergency has arisen and I have to ask you for help. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 316. Emergency. Isn't this an emergency now? Since the centralized meeting, we have all been in various troubles. What could be more urgent than now? The male voice deepened. Medea ignored him and kept talking to herself. There are two things now that have been conveyed by the headquarters. The first is the news about the mutation of a large number of top experimental creatures and the destruction of multiple experimental bases. Let us be careful, there is a piece of information on the monsters sent down from above. We avoided it. Secondly, a high-level defector appeared in the dark sky of the headquarters, and we needed our cooperation in arresting him. Now his defection area happens to be under the jurisdiction of the three of us. He is characterized by burnt skin all over his body and severe injuries. Of burns. You will only come to us if something goes wrong, the man snorted coldly. Stop complaining, Andorra, you have the heaviest task. King Enite is a rare mutant type 4 totem master. He can no longer be divided simply by animal or elemental systems. Don't miss the key moment. Medea said, a little dissatisfied. You should worry about yourself. The core of the three major institutions is on your side, the man Andorra responded. Okay, that's it. I hope you will keep these two things in mind. Also, Jace, if possible, the headquarters hopes that you can get the important treasure in the Duke's palace, Medea added. Heavy treasure, Garen's heart moved slightly. It should be called the Heart of Dragon Shadow. It's a treasure of the same nature as the crown of thorns I have here, Medea said lightly. Okay, I have something else to do. Please contact me when you have time. With a snap, the sound cut off. Then I'm leaving, Jess. Please contact me when you have time. To be honest, you are the three generals who are more pleasing to the eye. If Duke White Dragon Eagle can't handle it, I can come over and help you, the man said. Dora said calmly, and also disconnected. Thank you. Garen was slightly relieved when he saw the crystal ball slowly returning to its original red color, with the words disconnect appearing inside. It only lasted a few minutes and he didn't say a few words, but it already made Garen sweat slightly. General of the Elements. If there are only 3 people in the entire Titan City, then these 3 people are definitely considered to have the strength to solve the problem of subverting the level of Titan City. In other words, they are definitely the top beings at the level of the Grand Duke. In the wild, those monsters are actually experimental mutant creatures of the Black Sky Society, which is really unexpected. Garen held the deduction device, which he originally relied on, but now he felt a faint sense of danger. We must find a way to eliminate the threat as soon as possible. He planned to thoroughly explore the function of the crystal ball. After pondering for a while, Garen asked the two-headed lizard dragon to take most of the bugs out to collect potential points, and he returned to the villa with a gloomy expression. In the following time, Galen concentrated on staying in the villa, specializing in studying the role and function of the crystal ball deducer. This was related to his strongest strength now, so he put everything behind him. Gerda just left a letter saying that he would be away for a while and asked him to be careful about Dr. Lilin. After more than 10 days, finally, Garen discovered something new in the crystal ball. A key function regarding superior and subordinate control. In the Vermilion study room, Garen was sitting next to the broken window. The gap broken by the petrified white dragon was solidified into a gray-white stone slab with its petrified breath, blocking most of the place. Garen leaned against the bookshelf and sat in front of the desk. The bed on his left was filled with various scrolls and notebooks. The square carpet underfoot was also littered with white papers. There was a faint unpleasant smell that had been sealed for a long time in the whole room. Garen's eyes were calmly staring at the red crystal ball on the table, and his fingers kept touching it gently. Finally, the crystal ball glowed with red light again. A clear line of Kuwaitan text slowly ripples out from the middle part. Contact the lower-level deducer network. Is the lower-level deducer network controlled by me? Galen now understood that the crystal ball could use voice prints to identify the next command, and he asked softly in Kuwaitan. All deducers can be directly controlled by the superior deducer Sir Garen. Your deducer is at the general level, and your direct superior is the marshal commander level. Lower level deducers have school levels. Number 0032 GCR, your infer is the 32nd in Dongzhou. There are a total of 10 general level inferers placed in the Kuwaitan area. Please keep your function confidential. Your specific rank is general, with 5 levels available for command: lieutenant general, brigadier general, colonel, lieutenant colonel, and major. Please select the level you want to command. You can assign or remove the other party's access to the deducer at will. The information that was thoroughly explored this time was much clearer than last time. Garen looked at the 5 different options that appeared above. Since I can appoint and remove these people's right to use the deduction device at will, then the commanders above me should also be able to appoint and remove my right to use the deduction device at will. It seems that we must make another plan. He narrowed his eyes, feeling more and more dangerous and threatened. What is the key point of the control of the deducer? We must study it carefully. Those experimental subjects should have been controlled originally. How did they escape from the control of the deducer? Garen suddenly thought of the headquarters that General Medea mentioned. Defector. Perhaps we can get some answers from him. He suddenly had an idea. Now let's take a look at the networks I can control first. He reached out and gently touched the crystal ball. Select Lieutenant General Network. You have 2 Lieutenant Generals under your command to contact. 2 names suddenly appeared on the crystal ball. Lieutenant General Harris, Lieutenant General Quick-Aman. Both names are gray, with the words "not in contact" shown behind them. Garen looked at the names of the 2 lieutenant generals with a calm expression on his face. He continued to click on the brigadier general below, and 5 more names popped up. 2 of the names were gray, and 3 of them were actually red. The words "contacting" were displayed at the back. Garen's heart moved. He reached out and tapped the name of one of the brigadiers. "Brigadier General Harry," he whispered, "where are you now?" The person on the other side hesitated and was silent for a while. "Is it General Jace? I am currently stationed in Belu City. The governor's mansion here has been completely captured by monsters. I don't understand what the headquarters wants. Isn't such a chaotic world completely different from our original intention? This is a question." Young male voice. "I cannot understand the idea of involving innocent people in a conflict. Don't make random guesses about the intentions above," Garen replied in a hoarse voice. "Do you have the same idea as me?" "What an honor." Brigadier General Harry was a little surprised. "I have already guessed that among the 3 generals, you are definitely not as cold as you appear. I want to ask you a few questions. Can you answer me truthfully?" Garen said solemnly. "Excuse me." Harry's mood suddenly improved. "How much do you know about the layout of Duke White Dragon Eagle?" Garen first asked about the situation in Titan City. "White Dragon Eagle layout? This is the part that General Jeff Sess is responsible for. I am not authorized. However, I have a good relationship with Brigadier General Ellie under General Jeff. I can help you ask." "Thank you. This is the first question. The second question is, how many subordinates can you control now?" A trace of solemnity flashed in Garen's eyes. "Subordinates? I have 32 colonels, 109 lieutenant colonels, and 188 majors at the school level directly under my command. They basically control the entire urban and rural areas of Belu City. Do you want to mobilize military forces on a large scale? Sorry, you shouldn't guess your intentions at will. Harry reacted immediately. Isn't your deployment loss big? Fortunately, the deducers were distributed in time, otherwise it would be really troublesome. Harry answered affirmatively. Finally, a defector appears at the headquarters. He is a man whose skin is blackened and burned. Please pay attention. Garen conveyed the above instructions. Okay, that's it? If I ask you to pull out at least 10 heads and 3 types of totems now, are you sure? He was directly testing the opponent's strength level, and the data he asked was also estimated by him in advance. Yes, the error should not be too much. Harry hesitated. 3 type totems are still difficult. I can control only 2 right now, and they are both animal types. The rest can only be contacted by the other brigadiers. After all, only the brigadier general has at least 1 type 3 totem. Maybe you can look at the other people. But you have always been indifferent. Why did you suddenly think of mobilizing this time? Sorry, I was overthinking it again. Well, that's it. Garen broke the contact. Then he began to try to contact the brigadiers and school leaders he controlled one by one. Some of them lost their voices completely. The crystal ball showed that the other side was damaged. They were obviously either dead or the deducer was destroyed. 1 lieutenant general, 3 brigadiers, 12 directly subordinate colonels, 38 directly subordinate lieutenant colonels, and more than 200 directly subordinate majors. Directly means the direct troops that are only under the jurisdiction of Jace, that is, the direct troops that are only under the jurisdiction of Garen. They are the direct power in his hands. Each general has his own direct unit, which is the force under their direct control. These troops do not need to obey the orders of any other generals, but only the orders of the controlling generals, which are equivalent to private troops. Garen contacted all the subordinates he could still contact. These people were the subordinates he could directly control. By the time he made all the contacts, the sky outside was getting dark. The setting sun shone in through the window, illuminating the entire study into a golden red, giving people a warm feeling. He put down the crystal ball. I finally had a very intuitive understanding of the 2 most important points. The first point is Jace's previous image. Garen took out a piece of white paper, and using his master-level precision drawing ability and Maiwa's super control, he picked up a pen and quickly drew the overall image of a figure on the paper. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 317. On the white paper, a strange man covered in black robes with his whole body almost floating was clearly visible, an unusual image. He has no legs, and his black robe covers him from head to tail. Looking from the front, you can only see his pale and delicate chin. Judging from the descriptions of these subordinates, this Jace is definitely a very gloomy person, mysterious, unpredictable, powerful, and seldom takes care of things. No one knows his specific strength, and no one has seen his specific appearance and figure. Galen compared the obtained information and carefully completed the image of Jace. These characteristics are all very favorable factors for me to impersonate him. Galen put away his pen. Then comes the second point. To give an overall estimate, although General Jace's power has been greatly reduced, he can still directly or indirectly control more than 50 Type 3 animal totems, and at least several hundred Type 2 totems. This is a very powerful force. If Jace himself is not inferior to the Grand Duke, then this is equivalent to most of the forces in the entire Titan City. Such forces are planning in secret, and I don't know how many there are in Titan City. The Totem Master is part of the Black Sky Society, and it's hard to think of Iron City not being destroyed. Garen felt extremely frightened just thinking about it. The power of the Black Sky Society is too huge. This is still the remaining power after the monster chaos. If it were intact, it would probably be stronger. But then a doubt suddenly came to mind. Could it be that the cave that Gerda and I went into together was really just a cave where a Type 2 totem master was stationed? A mere Type 2 totem master, actually able to protect a general-level deduction device? Or is it that Black Sky Society is confident that no one can unlock these deducers in 3 attempts? Garen recalled the last explosion of a white light beam that shot into the sky. That explosion shocked the entire Titan city. The white light column that shot into the sky was more conspicuous than the lighthouse, and it was just the explosion of the furnace inside. What kind of factory furnace could be that powerful? Doubts emerged from his heart one by one. It seems that what Gerda went through down there was not that simple. He almost made a certain judgment. Forget it, let's focus on solving the hidden dangers of control of the deducer first. Garen focused his attention on the person who defected from the headquarters. If we can find this person, we may be able to get more information and intelligence from him. Just in case, the two-headed lizard dragon and the petrified white dragon went all out to hunt down the potential points and try their best to accumulate as many potential points for me as possible, and no more potential points can be invested in the silver totem until the hidden danger is eliminated. Garen made up his mind. History has already gone awry, and now you have to deal with everything yourself. In the following time, Garen concentrated on searching for the possible defector, and media sent another video file. Everyone started searching based on the image data. Garen's potential points are increasing day by day as time goes by. Once a stronger Type 3 monster is triggered, he will mobilize his subordinates to cooperate to kill the monster. If it is too powerful, he will temporarily avoid it. Going back and forth like this, the potential points gradually accumulated to an objective amount. All the galleons were spent on the evolutionary core White Tiger. Unfortunately, hundreds of potential points were thrown in, and not even a single shot was taken. This made him feel even more unhappy. The surrounding monster groups gradually became wary of the villa area where Garen was located, and began to swarm in large numbers, and it became increasingly difficult to obtain potential points. It was common to encounter 2 or 3 Type 3 monsters gathering together, surrounded by a group of monsters. A large group of Type 2 monsters and Type 1 monsters. Each Type 3 monster formed a large legion, dividing and cutting up the entire outer city of Titan. Galen occupies the east of the city, 6 Type 3 monsters occupy the south of the city, and the west and north are occupied by an astonishing number of dozens or hundreds of Type 3 monsters, and the number is still increasing. This force is also the main suppression force. The monster army in Titan City. There is even an extremely powerful three-eyed black bear among them. This monster is huge, 13 meters tall and more than 20 meters long. The speed power is astonishingly strong, and there is a large-scale weird purple-red aura lingering around the body. The speed power of all monsters covered by this aura has been greatly improved. And they are not afraid of death, and they completely lose their minds when fighting each other. This three-eyed bear and the Grand Duke's Platinum Dragon Eagle had been confronting each other for a long time, and both sides were afraid of each other. However, the human strength in Titan City is getting weaker and weaker as the battle continues. And the more monsters you fight, the more you fight. The three-eyed black bear basically doesn't need to take action, while the Grand Duke has to keep taking action in order to try to prevent the defensive circle from being put under too much pressure. Garen could see the confrontation between the black bear and the Grand Duke many times in the east of the city. The black bear jumped on the top of the mobile building. From a distance, the surrounding buildings were like building block models compared to him. They would break and fall down if they were touched. Garen continued to pile up potential points on the black-striped white tiger. There were differences in the evolution of the original totem and the silver totem. He couldn't figure out the pattern either. The situation in the city has become increasingly serious. Garen went to the city several times but failed to meet Gerda and the others. Jessica's condition miraculously got better and better, and there seemed to be a strong improvement. Both Goth and Andy participated in the defense circle against the monsters outside the city. Especially Goth, There are basically no people to be seen. In the ward, Jessica was wearing a white hospital gown, sitting on the edge of the bed and gently stroking her belly, with a faint hint of happiness on her face. Galen sat aside peeling an apple for her. The faint morning sunlight fell on the right side of the two people, forming a window-shaped white spot on the floor. "When did you discover it?" Garen asked softly as he peeled the apples continuously. "It was probably a few days ago. At that time, I suddenly felt like vomiting. The doctor came over to check and then scolded Gerda severely. Jessica's originally delicate face became gentle and sweet at this time. "Stand up. That guy Goth is really unreasonable." Garen shook his head. "You are so sick and he is still thinking about this." "It's not his fault, it's me," Jessica interrupted Galen. "It's me who wanted to give him a child." She had a faint smile on her face. Galen secretly observed Jessica's face, and he became more and more suspicious that Jessica must have been transformed into silver. Gerda pushed open the ward and saw Garen sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, quietly peeling an apple. Ever since he got the news that Jessica was pregnant, he immediately hurried back from the front line just to see if it was true. "Garen," he stepped forward in surprise and patted Garen hard on the shoulder. "Yesterday I talked about you with Andy and Aililan. Aililan said that he wrongly blamed you last time and wanted to apologize to you, but he couldn't find you. I didn't expect to meet you here." "What? Are you here to see Jessica?" "No, I'm here to find you." Garen stood up and split the apple into two, giving one to Goth and one to Jessica. "Let's go, let Jessica take a rest, let's come out and talk first." He pulled God out of the ward without any explanation. "What's the matter? Are you in such a hurry?" Gerda said dissatisfiedly while chewing on the apple. After being pulled out of the ward by Garen, the two found a quiet corner and stood facing each other. "Okay, now can you tell me what's going on? How is Jessica's condition?" Galen paused and asked directly. "I think she seems to be getting better." Gerda smiled slightly. "Although there is no way to completely cure it, it shouldn't only take half a year like before. Don't worry." "Last time," Garen thought about his words for a moment, "last time I left a message asking you to be careful about Aililan. There is actually a reason." His expression also became serious, as did Gerda. The atmosphere was slightly solemn. Garen paused. "I once encountered a special method of the Black Sky Society. The name is silverization. This is a special method that can control the behavior of living things." "What are you suspecting?" "Silverization. Jessica was silvered? That's what you want to say, right? Don't worry about this. Aililan has mentioned it long ago. We have also encountered similar silver totems. The characteristics are actually clear. Is Jessica okay? You reminded me last time, and I checked it after that." "Don't worry." Gerda immediately relaxed and patted Galen on the shoulder nonchalantly. "You are too worried, please forgive me." "Relax, don't be so paranoid." Garen frowned, looking at Gerda's relaxed expression. He seemed to be doubting his own judgment. After silvering, the controller must be completely destroyed to release the silvered creature. Destroy the controller, Goth thought thoughtfully. Seeing that his goal was achieved, Garen stopped talking and changed the subject, asking about the current situation in the inner city. "Knowing that Gerda has now recognized the Grand Duke, I am sincerely happy for him." The two were separated again, and Garen had to concentrate on hunting down the defector from the Black Sky Society headquarters. To be able to escape all the way from the headquarters here is obviously not a simple person. If it were the original elemental General Jace, he might not be afraid of the opponent, but now he is just a fake, and his strength is about the same as that of the Brigadier General. If his identity were exposed, he might not even be able to compare with the Brigadier General. Not to mention the Lieutenant General and General level above. Back at the villa, Garen concentrated on practicing the technique in the villa, and finally became proficient in the vision sharing technique and could put it to practical use. He was sitting in the villa, and his parasitic beetles were crawling out in all directions. The two-headed lizard dragon controlled 4 deep swamp crocodiles, and hundreds of parasitic beetles under his command spread out in all directions. After investing hundreds of potential points, the white tiger with black stripes seemed to have a hint of movement. Although it failed to evolve, circles of finer black stripes began to appear on its body surface. It looks like a black tiger with white stripes. Its size is gradually getting larger and larger, developing towards a giant beast. This gave Garen a vague sense of hope. It took hundreds of potential points to achieve this effect, which made him wonder why no one had been able to successfully cultivate the second type of black-striped white tiger for so many years. Just looking at the difficulty, you can imagine. Time passed by minute by minute. Garen invested all the potential points he got into the black-striped white tiger. The army of parasitic beetles is also increasing, which has attracted the attention of the surrounding Type 3 monsters. When the number of beetles reached 200, Garen finally stopped parasitizing, and just let the two-headed lizard dragon parasitize the Fukasawa giant crocodile. At the same time, he relies on the vision-sharing technique at any time and constantly uses the silver totem to grasp all the surrounding situations. As time goes by, the number of monsters around increases. There are more and more high-level monsters, and there are more than 10 Type 3 monsters in just 2 months. When Galen stayed in a remote villa area, he could feel the terrifying and depressing feeling of the approaching heavy rain in the inner city. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 318. Ouch. In the gray sky outside the window, a giant white dragon slowly flapped its huge wings and flew across the sky. It made a huge noise. Garen was wearing a gray robe, standing in front of the window, looking at the petrified white dragon flying by, his eyes vaguely unfocused, as if he was thinking about something. He is standing in a new study room. The white study room has off-white walls and floors, and the wall coverings and carpets all exude a damp smell that has just been cleaned. After standing for a moment, he turned around and looked at Lala, who was packing things behind him. Have all the things from the original study been moved here? Yes sir. Lara put the rag back into the basin. Do you have any other instructions? It's now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If there's nothing else, I'm going to repair the holes in the study. Just nail it with wooden boards and nail a few more layers, Garen ordered. Okay. Lala hesitated, but this will cause air leakage. You don't have to worry about it. Then I'll go down first. Well, go ahead. Garen turned around and sat at the table. His eyes were still unfocused, as if he were looking at a very far away place. Lala looked at him strangely, turned around and walked out of the new study, closing the door gently. The footsteps gradually moved away and became quieter. Garen was still sitting at the table. He didn't move for a long time, just sitting there blankly. I don't know how long it took, but suddenly there was a clear clicking sound in his arms. The focus in Galen's eyes suddenly adjusted, he blinked and rubbed his temples on both sides. Well, this vision-sharing technique still needs some time to get used to. The sights and sounds are completely inconsistent, like sitting in a movie theater watching a pantomime. He rested for a while, and a trace of doubt appeared on his face again. He took out a delicate pale gold pocket watch from his pocket. The wind on it had stopped. Garen gently twisted the spring again and set the time on his pocket watch. So many days have passed. How long has it been since the last time I met Gerda? 10 days. 20 days? I always feel like something is wrong with that Alilin. He put down his pocket watch and frowned tightly. Suddenly, a hint of surprise flashed across Garen's face. He stood up and looked out the window from afar. In that direction was a large area of gray-white building ruins. Among the large areas of abandoned city walls and buildings, a black beetle half as tall as a man quickly crawled towards the villa. It had a piece of black trousers worn by humans in its mouth. Dragging behind the trousers was a thin, charred human body. The human body was wearing long black clothes and trousers, its hair was singed, and the exposed skin on its hands and feet were covered in large areas of black and red ulcers. Being dragged along by beetles, the human body left a clear wet mark on the dirty ground. The beetle crawled along the flatter ground, bypassed several large and small potholes, and quickly approached the villa. Galen opened the window, exerted force on his feet, and jumped out of the window lightly, landing steadily in the yard outside the villa. After standing firm, he took the initiative to meet the black beetle dragging a person. As soon as I got closer, a festering smell suddenly wafted over. Garen's brows suddenly furrowed, and he looked around the human body warily. His whole body was charred, and almost all of his exposed skin was covered with black and red pustules and blisters. These large and small blisters are like ripe purple grapes, clustered in clusters and densely packed. Some of them have been worn out, and black and yellow viscous pus leaks out. This man's face was covered with tiny pustules, so swollen that it was almost impossible to see his face, and there were only 2 gaps between his eyes. His lips were purple, his body was swollen, and he seemed to be in a coma. All of his hair was burnt off, leaving him bald. Half of his scalp seemed to have been torn apart with great force, revealing the scarlet dermal skin. Garen looked at this man, his eyes narrowed slightly, and a look of vigilance flashed across his face. Interesting, it's not so much that I found you, but that you took the initiative to find me. I don't believe that there is such a coincidence, such a large area, that you happen to be unconscious on my territory. He muttered to himself. Taking a step closer, he squatted down and stretched out his hands to pull off the man's chest clothes. The black coat was pulled open and he was wearing nothing underneath. Woman, he put on his clothes and stood up, resisting the stench. Since you took the initiative to find me, I want to see what you want to do. Garen turned around and strode towards the villa. Behind him, a giant Fukasawa crocodile crawled over. With a slight flick of his tail, he lifted the woman onto his back and followed Garen steadily. The door of the villa has been opened, and Lala is standing by the door, with a calm expression on her face. She has seen too many weird scenes during this time, and her nerves are obviously numb. She looked at the back of the Fukasawa giant crocodile following Garen, and the tragic state of the human body made her pale. As she got closer, she had to cover her nose and endure the strong and pungent stench. The stench was nauseating. Go get some water and towels and help her clean her body, Garen whispered. Okay. I'll get warm water. Lala ran towards the kitchen as if she was running away. Garen turned around and grabbed the man with one hand, put his hand on the man's left shoulder, and gently lifted him off the giant crocodile's back. It's not too dirty, just hold it with both hands. Who are you? Aren't you Jace? Suddenly his eyes met a pair of surprisingly bright eyes. This woman actually spoke, her voice was like a leaky bellows, most of her throat was filled with the noise of vented breath, and her accent was actually a pure Sunnia spoken language. She suddenly turned over and stood up, keeping a meter away from Garen. Jace? You really know a lot. Garen narrowed his eyes, quietly looking at the bald woman in front of her with her hair burned off. It's such a terrifying vitality. If it were an ordinary person, suffering from injuries like yours, he would have turned into a charred corpse long ago. By the way, your Shania language is very authentic. Shania language, a hint of confusion suddenly appeared in the woman's eyes. What is that? Tell me, what are you doing with Jace? Garen asked softly in Shania. During this period of time living in the inner city, he also deliberately learned all these commonly used common languages. Anyway, there is plenty of potential now, so there is no need to worry about wasting it. Now it seems very wise to come over. Jace, the woman suddenly became confused. By the way, what should I do with Jace? Who is Jace? A trace of panic clearly appeared in her eyes. Suddenly she covered her head tightly and squatted down, a look of pain on her swollen face. My head hurt so much, she fell limply to the ground, squirming like a disgusting slug, leaving a pool of wet pus on the floor tiles at the door. Waves of stench spread out, making Garin, who had an unusually sensitive sense of smell, feel like vomiting. The flow of this woman's energy and blood was as clear to him as if he saw it with his own eyes. Her chi and blood were stagnating in her brain, and the rest of her chi and blood were so weak that she could barely maintain her life. It looks like a mess of knotted red yarn, but the knotting occurs in the head of the brain. "What's your name?" Garin lowered his voice and conveyed it directly to the woman's ears with secret force. "What's my name?" The woman's eyes became more and more confused. "I can't remember. My head hurts." She hugged her head tightly and curled up on the ground, like a caterpillar that was about to be burned to death. Lala just came over at this time carrying a silver basin and a black towel. Garin raised his hand to stop him. There was an inexplicable flash in Garin's eyes. "I'll come in person, you go and do other things first." Yes, Lala didn't ask anything, just lowered her head and turned around, continuing to do the previous things. Garin gently lifted the woman up, picked up the basin and towel with one hand, and went directly to the auxiliary bedroom on the second floor. He tried asking the person some common sense questions along the way, but found that she couldn't remember anything. And judging from the energy and blood, it really doesn't look like lying. The woman seemed to have suffered some serious blow to the head. Through chi and blood diagnosis, Jia Long found that her head and brain had been partially damaged, and that part of her brain had changed from tofu brain to tofu dregs. A quarter of the volume of the entire brain was destroyed, but this woman was not dead yet and still survived with tenacious vitality. "It's simply a miracle," Galen exclaimed and retracted his hand from the woman's head, looking at the face of the woman whose consciousness was gradually blurring. That face was like the most terrifying and disgusting face in a ghost movie, with swelling, stench, and ulceration. Like a pile of black and purple rotting meat. If it weren't for the fact that some of the secondary sexual characteristics on her breasts were not still there, no one would be able to tell her gender, and it would even be questionable whether she could be regarded as a human being. Garin just pressed it, and his palms were covered with sticky, foul-smelling pus. If you were thrown out on the street like this, the dead babies passing by might regard you as one of the same kind. Your whole body is severely infected and suppurating. If you hadn't met me, you wouldn't even have a 1,000th chance of survival." He closed the bedroom door, wet the towel with warm water, wrung it out, then walked to the person beside the bed and gently wiped the pus off her face with the towel. With his fingers like scissors, he cut all the man's clothes and trousers to pieces with a few strokes, revealing the swollen and deformed body underneath. Garin took a towel and began to carefully scrub the woman's body, removing all the dirt and blood clots on the surface. I asked Lala to change several basins of water one after another, and finally managed to get them all clean. Then, he closed the door and told Lala not to come in. He was alone, his palms slightly glowing like ruby, like hands carved from jade. Standing in front of the woman, Garin took a deep breath. Buzz. Garin's mouth made a sound like a vibrating bee, and at the same time, the fingers of his hands brought up a large afterimage, and quickly touched the woman's chest, abdomen, head, and legs. The huge sound waves kept vibrating the woman's whole body. Garin felt like he was treating a charred corpse. His fingers touched the acupuncture points where they should be, and the touch felt like rotten wood. This is him using secret martial arts methods to temporarily activate his life potential to achieve the purpose of quickly healing his body, similar to Tiangang Ba Lai. It's just that such activation will have a certain impact on the body's lifespan, but at this juncture, if this woman can't survive it, she will probably lose her life, let alone her lifespan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 319. After a round of fingerprints were placed, white steam emerged slightly from Garen's head. He took 2 steps back, and the red jade color quickly faded from his palms. The moment the treatment was completed, a transparent film of light suddenly filled the woman's body. The light film disappeared in a flash, completely covering the woman's body. A cold, sharp, knife-sharp chill instantly filled the entire bedroom. He is indeed a totem master. A smile appeared on Garen's lips. His body involuntarily glowed with white totem light to resist this extremely powerful energy fluctuation. The woman's eyelids moved, she barely opened her eyes, and her slightly crooked mouth opened. "Who am I?" Her eyes were covered with mist, full of bloodshot eyes and eye mucus. "Your name is Leylan." With a thought in his heart, Garen suddenly walked up to her and said softly. "Your name is Raylan Longbus. You are the biological sister of my Garen Longbus." "My name is Leylan? I'm the biological sister of Garen Longbus," the woman repeated after Garen unknowingly. "We have been separated since we were children. There was a fire at home." Garen's voice became softer. "We have been separated since childhood. There was a fire at home," the woman repeated step by step with Garen, her eyes gradually becoming clear from confusion. Galen guided her step by step and weaved an almost perfect life for her. He could see that this woman had lost her memory and her brain had been severely damaged, but the totem light that had just happened showed that she was obviously extremely powerful. The person who can escape from the headquarters of the Black Sky Society cannot be a simple person. As for whether this kind of guidance is successful, Garen is just trying it, and there will be no loss anyway. After spending more than half an hour, Garen finally put the woman to sleep again. He then turned around and left the bedroom, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The stench inside made it almost hard for him to breathe. He just made up the oldest memory of his childhood, and did not change the rest. Instead, he said that he just found her outside his residence, and he didn't know what happened to her during the years they were separated. "It seems like we need to spend some time carefully digging out something from this woman." In the following time, Garen was alone with this woman every day. He called her Leland Longbus, and the woman really thought of herself as Leland Longbus. A small part of her brain has been damaged, and many memories have long been incomplete. At this time, she has completely accepted Garen's instilled memories and regards herself as his biological sister. Garen personally took care of her daily life every day, which made her more and more sure of her memory. She was not her biological brother and sister, or her only relative. Who else would be willing to take care of a burnt corpse that was full of stench and was about to die? Leylan became more and more intimate with Garen, but this woman had been completely disfigured, and it was impossible to tell what she looked like before. The tendons on one side of her mouth were burned out, and her entire mouth was tilted to the right. Drool kept flowing out when she spoke, and food might leak out at any time when she ate. After some rest and recovery, the skin all over the body was covered with dense blisters and scars. The burned and wrinkled skin looked like that of an 80 or 90-year-old woman, sagging and shriveled. After Leylan lowered her guard against him, Garen gradually began to inquire about some of the information she still remembered. More than 10 days later, in the pure white secondary bedroom, Leylan was half lying on the big bed, quietly looking at Garen, who was reading a book beside him. A cool breeze blew in through the gap in the open window, and there was a faint smell of corpse. The golden sunlight fell on the back of Galen's right hand, reflecting the delicate white ivory luster. A look of envy suddenly appeared on Leylan's face. "What's wrong?" Garen put down the notebook in his hand. This was something he had looted from the blonde female totem master. It recorded some knowledge about the cultivation of primitive totems. It is a very remote sex inheritance, although there are only a few points, but it also has reference value. "It's nothing." "Brother, are you looking at the training notes of the original totem?" Leylan asked in a low voice. Her voice had recovered a lot. It no longer had a leaky sound, but had turned into a low, hoarse female voice. He sounded very young, probably no more than 30 years old. Yes, I snatched this from an enemy. I just flipped through it casually, Garen replied with a smile. What do you want to say? Leyland thought for a moment and frowned. My brain was seriously injured and I can't remember everything, but I can still recall some things. Compared with the original totem, the biological totem, which is what you call the silver totem, has much greater advantages. Brother, why don't you focus on cultivating it? Silver totem. Garen's heart moved, and he shook his head and said, I can't help it. The silver totem can only be controlled by the crystal deduction device. If this is the main method, won't it mean that we will have to be completely controlled by others in the future? Crystal deduction device, Lei Ian's eyes flashed with confusion. I seem to have some impression. Garen was not in a hurry, just waiting quietly for Leland to slowly recall. Time passes minute by minute. Raylan opened his mouth. I remember this thing, its control mechanism is very imperfect, it can be eliminated and avoided. She paused. From a technical perspective, these things can't even transmit images to each other, and can only barely transmit sounds. Although it is a touch operation and there is related encryption technology, the principle involved is quite simple. The specific method of unlocking is, Suddenly, she clutched her head and let out a low roar of pain. She suddenly fell on the quilt, her body trembling violently, as if she was running naked into the freezing cold weather. Don't force yourself, rest. Rest first and relax. Garen stood up quickly, with a look of concern on his face. He stretched out his hand and quickly pressed on several pain-relieving acupuncture points, which relieved Lei Ian's pain a little. It seems that you are being hunted down because of these key skills. Those bastards from the Black Sky Society. Sooner or later, I will come and kill them. Garen's eyes showed a hint of deep murderous intent, either real or fake. Don't. Brother, you can't defeat them. Leyland endured the pain and held on to Garen. They must be deliberately trying to destroy this part of my memory. Believe me, I will be able to think of a solution sooner or later. Don't be anxious, take your time. Galen then sat down and covered Leland with the quilt again. This figure, which was supposed to be a young woman, was sitting on a white bed, looking like an old lady in her 70s or 80s, with a bald head and scars and wrinkles all over her body. Apart from her voice, there was no sign of youth at all, and she continued to exude a legacy. The faint smell. When she heard Galen's answer, a touch of emotion appeared on her face. They wanted me to die, but I survived. Although I can't remember who hurt me like this. But sooner or later I will figure everything out, Leyland said fiercely. She paused and looked at Garen. Brother, don't worry. I can't remember the specific method of disabling the crystal deducer, but we can bypass this. Temporarily alleviate this direct control mechanism. Oh, Garen's eyes suddenly lit up. Ease. Yes, this kind of control right is that only the superior crystal deducer can view some information of the direct subordinates. Since the secret language is extremely reliable, it is generally impossible to pretend to be the leader. And if the superior crystal wants to control the subordinate crystal, the goal is achieved by operating crystals. There are two major prerequisites for operating crystals. One is that the crystal being operated is not damaged. Garen nodded. He indeed saw that the damaged crystals all turned gray and could no longer be manipulated. The other is that the crystal being operated is in a sluggish state. Hysteresis, Galen asked repeatedly, what is hysteresis? That is a unique state of crystal. It represents the decline of function. Its function is slow, the message transmission is slow, and the error is large. In this way, if no one from Mahakala comes out to repair it, once it is forcibly manipulated, it will destroy this crystal directly. Ordinary crystals are fine, but higher level crystals, such as kernel level, are more difficult to create. Therefore, in order to avoid losses, Superiors generally will not forcibly manipulate lower-level crystals in this situation. Lei Yan's eyes showed a confident and calm look. And in the current chaotic environment, monsters are rampant, many extremely powerful experimental subjects have escaped, and more than single digits of generals have been killed. It is natural for crystals to lag due to shock. As long as the means are natural, so the people above won't doubt it. At least you don't have to worry that the biological totem you have worked so hard to cultivate will suddenly rebel. This method is good. Garen nodded solemnly, confirming the possibility of this method. It's just that we can't always be in a lag state, right? This can definitely be delayed for several months, and we will think of another way then, Lei Lan said seriously. At least this way we don't have to worry about the information in the crystal being randomly viewed. Can you still check the crystal information at will? Garen was shocked. Only those at the martial level will do, Lei Lan nodded. Come on, come here first, I'll set the status for your crystal. Garen narrowed his eyes and hesitated for a moment, but still took out his crystal deduction device. You don't have to give it to me, just hold it like this. Lei Lan had no intention of taking it. She stretched out her right index finger, and a black flame quickly ignited on her fingertip. The firelight continuously carved an extremely complex black magic symbol in the air, like countless letters K superimposed together to form a roulette-like shape. Go, she gently moved the technique forward. Laugh. The black magic symbol instantly turned into a black light and shot directly into Garen's crystal deduction device. The entire pink crystal deducer suddenly glowed with gray luster and completely dimmed. Garen felt that the original vague feeling of fluctuation gradually disappeared. Okay, but just in case, brother, you'd better learn relevant biochemistry knowledge from me recently, in case there are some troublesome situations when I'm not around, and it's easier for you to deal with, Lei Lan said carefully. Garen was stunned for a moment, then smiled knowingly. That's fine. That's what I mean too. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 320. Lei Lan is indeed a very good researcher. If her scary appearance is removed, the study atmosphere will be even more perfect. Garen carefully began to follow her to learn basic biochemical knowledge, advanced mathematics, advanced physics, biological structure, and a series of specialized and advanced subject knowledge, which gradually entered his field of vision. Time passed day by day, and Garen was immersed in the process of being exposed to new knowledge, almost forgetting everything. Boom! Suddenly, the quill in Garen's hand shook slightly and drew a black mark on the paper. What's going on? He stood up, quickly walked to the window and looked out. In the gray-white sky outside, large and densely packed black dots spread rapidly toward the sky above the inner city like ink dripping into clear water. These black spots are all flying monsters of different sizes, including one-horned monitor lizards and giant flies and insects. All kinds of new and strange creatures emerge in endlessly. They swarmed over the inner city. Is this? Garen suddenly remembered something very important to the people in the inner city. Brother, what's going on? The door was suddenly pushed open, and Lei Lan, wearing a gray robe to hide his features, strode in. I seem to feel the vibration of the high-density energy core. She hid all her ugly face under her gray robe. I don't know, but it should be those monsters attacking the city on a large scale, Garen replied solemnly. This siege is different. The previous ones are not as big as this one. I'm afraid the real strongest monsters are about to come out. Titan City has a high-level treasure passed down from generation to generation. It is said to be the heart of Dragon's Shadow, which can gradually corrode and damage all hostile creatures within a certain range. So as long as the people inside can survive for a while, these monsters will not be a worry, Lei Lan said quite relaxedly. She glanced at Garen's expression and asked, Brother, do you have any friends still in the inner city? Garen didn't speak, just nodded. Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have a look. You have to be careful when you stay in the villa. Don't go out randomly. I know. Leyland nodded and replied. She shouted over her shoulder. Lala! Lala! Come here. For other people, her attitude was not so gentle, and there was a hint of impatience in her voice. Soon, Lala, wearing a black and white skirt-made outfit, ran in panting. Miss Leyland, what are your orders? Lara didn't like Mr. Gallen's sister. She often looked at her skin and face with a cold and jealous expression. This woman who has lost her appearance and figure has an almost perverted feeling of jealousy towards anyone of her kind who is prettier than herself. This made her feel uneasy. Leyland gave her a disgusted look. Who do you want to seduce with your skirt being so short? My brother? You damn little bitch, if you keep wearing such a short skirt, don't wear any clothes at all. Go and prepare clothes and equipment for your brother to go out, Leyland said impatiently, yelled loudly. Okay Leyland, don't be so harsh, Lala is still young, please be tolerant. Garen frowned and said softly. Leyland suddenly changed his voice to an unusually soft one. Brother, you don't know that these servants need to be trained hard before they know how hard one life is. Otherwise, they will forget their roots after being comfortable for a long time. I will take care of these small things. You can just go about your business. Garen couldn't say anything else. He could see that Leyland had a bad temper originally, and now that he had lost his appearance and figure, it was even worse. Then I'll go out first. Okay, do you need me to go with you? Leyland asked softly. No need. Garen shook his head and walked out of the room with Lala. As he walked down the corridor, Garen glanced at Lala, who felt a little aggrieved. Don't take it to heart. My sister was seriously injured, so she is in a bad mood. Please be more considerate. I can understand, Lala replied softly. That's good. Garen nodded. After changing his clothes and putting on his grey robe, Garen put on his hood and quickly walked out of the area around the villa. In the open space on the street in front, a huge white dragon with a length of 12 meters was lying. The petrified white dragon is motionless, like an exquisite and perfect white jade sculpture, extremely beautiful. When it felt Garen's arrival, it slowly raised its slender neck, turned sideways, and let out a low growl at Garen. Sigh. Garen walked over and rubbed its head. Okay, this time I want you to take me there. Be careful not to let the stronger monster find you. Garen smiled and jumped lightly, turned over and jumped on the back of the petrified white dragon. The white dragon's body is not smooth, but very rough, with scales covering it layer by layer, like chainmail with slightly raised wavy lines. It gives people a sense of wildness and elegance. Garen jumped on the white dragon's back and sat in an empty space between the two wings. Directly in front of him was the unsuspecting back of the white dragon's head. The triangular fin on top of his head was like a coordinate device, giving Garen a judgment. Orientation standards. Garen sat down cross-legged, stroking the warm and hard dragon scales underneath, found two slightly raised scales, and firmly grasped the edges. Take off, he issued a mental command. The petrified white dragon flapped its two rag-like white wings vigorously a few times, then ran forward with its two hind legs, jumping up one at a time from slow to fast. Call. He flapped his wings fiercely, and the huge airflow suddenly caused a large number of rocks below to roll around, and countless dust was blown to both sides. The petrified white dragon opened its big mouth full of fangs, blew out a breath of white air, raised its head, flapped its wings and flew towards the inner city. His wings flapped rhythmically. Garen sat on the dragon's back, looking at the streets and houses that were getting smaller and farther away. Around his villa, large groups of black beetles looked up at him, as well as the Fukasawa giant crocodile. The most conspicuous one was the two-headed lizard dragon, which looked up at him with its two heads and kept letting out unhappy growls. Apparently he was unhappy that he couldn't go out hunting. The white houses below gradually become smaller and smaller, like small blocks like boxes. Most of the buildings in the large construction area were damaged. This area was close to the city wall. At a glance, it looked like a pool of white gravel on the edge of the city wall, crowded together. The petrified white dragon flew high into the sky, and unicorn monitor lizards gradually appeared around it, including ordinary black ones, red ones, and gray-white ones that were larger and stronger. These gray-white one-horned monitor lizards are only slightly smaller than white dragons. It looks very fierce. Garen lay on the white dragon's back, condensing his energy and blood to the extreme, and then completely covered himself with his gray robe. Call. A giant black bird like a vulture passed by the right side of Galen. This giant bird was as huge as the white dragon. Different from other creatures, although it was slightly afraid of the white dragon, it was not like other creatures. Keep your distance. The petrified white dragon let out a low growl of dissatisfaction, and was about to turn around to chase and kill the strange bird, but was immediately stopped by Garen. Now he has flown into the city and is heading towards the inner city. There are more and more monsters in the air around him, and it is a huge area of darkness. There are all kinds of strange creatures everywhere. The top of the head is also densely packed. I don't know how many there are. Garen looked down. The Titan city below was originally in the shape of a white disk, but now it has turned into a broken and tattered disk. Only a small area in the center is still intact, like a hemispherical. A glass cover covers the center. A huge three-eyed black bear and a black panther with a black wing growing out of its back were occupying separate directions and slowly approaching the inner city. Behind them are countless dense armies of monsters. From a high altitude, it looks like two black curtains, slowly covering the inner city. The fierce cold wind kept passing through the gray robe, making Garen feel chilled all over. He adjusted his energy and blood to keep himself on the critical line between being frozen and being discovered. Lying on the dragon's back, he quietly ordered the white dragon to fly down. Wow! The petrified white dragon was glowing with a pale white halo, and Garen was also shrouded in it. It swooped down, and the surrounding flying monsters avoided it. Whenever they entered the range of the white light, their speed was abnormally slow, and their joints became stiff and weak. The petrified white dragon placed Galleon at the tunnel entrance of the War Guild. Garen jumped off the dragon's back silently, transformed into a grey shadow, rushed to the entrance of the tunnel, and got directly in. Being familiar with the road, he quickly rushed towards the inner city, following the abandoned passage. After walking around for a while, two black armored guards suddenly appeared in front of them. Who? Without saying anything, Garen took out his guild medal and flashed it. The two guards suddenly looked shocked. You must have just come back from afar. Please hurry up, those monsters are about to attack the city. The totem master who was able to stay outside and just came back now was definitely not an ordinary existence. The faces of the two soldiers suddenly showed a look of respect. Garen quickly passed the two of them, and soon a guarding totem master appeared in front of him. A black totem spider was attached to the inner wall, and a large number of red compound eyes stared at Garen eagerly. Certificate, the totem master man asked coldly. Garen took out his guild medal and flashed it. He looked forward and saw that there were several checkpoints ahead, all defended by totem masters. Suddenly a look of surprise appeared on his face. What happened? Are you so tightly guarded? The man looked downcast, glanced at Garen, just shook his head and said nothing. Come in quickly, sir. The city is in urgent need of high-end combat power like you. You will know when you go in. Garen nodded, quickened his pace and rushed inside. He quickly passed through the stone gate guarded by the guild and walked into the guild's internal hall. There were only a few people inside, and he went outside. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 321. The streets were densely packed with people, most of whom were looking up at the sky. No one made a sound. Garen then raised his head. I saw a large area of white dragon eagles and giant eagles densely packed in the sky above the inner city. There were almost 1,000 of them, forming a circular circle and flying continuously, ready to deal with the countless monster armies outside. By the way, Gerda. Where are Gerda and the others? Garen quickly moved through the crowd and ran towards Gerda's residence. There is a high level of security everywhere along the way, and guards and totem divisions can be seen rushing to set up defenses at any time. Garen had already remembered that this crucial decisive battle seemed to be the most significant reversal of change in Titan City in history. But he didn't expect that he would accidentally forget this critical period because of Lei Ian's appearance. Gerda looked at the scene in front of him in silence. The black and white photo frame at home was placed on the table, and there were slight cracks on the glass surface. He picked it up gently and carefully wiped the dust off the surface. There was chaos and chaos everywhere on the ground. Goth, suddenly a familiar voice came from outside. Gerda was startled, adjusted his facial expression, stood up, turned around and opened the door. He saw a gloomy-looking Garen standing outside his door, wearing a grey robe and looking dusty. "Are you okay?" Garen looked at him doubtfully. "How could something happen? How could something happen to a great man like me who can abuse both of you?" Goth bulged his biceps on his right arm and laughed. Jessica sighed. Garen lowered his voice. Bang! A big hand pressed hard on the door frame beside his face. "Don't mention Jessica to me." Gerda lowered his head and his voice suddenly became low. "What?" Garen was slightly startled. He simply squeezed in and closed the door behind his back. As soon as Garen entered the door, he saw that the walls of the house were filled with all kinds of nasty and unpleasant curse words. "Goth, you are a shameless bitch. Curse you. Curse your body to be eaten by wild dogs after you die. I hope you will have no children for the rest of your life. Even if you give birth to a son, it will not end well." Vicious words were written on the walls, many of them clearly written by people who didn't often curse. It still looks a little raw. Red writing fills all the walls in the house. "What's going on?" Garen sat down and asked in a deep voice. Goth also sat down. He didn't answer right away. Just silence. The two of them were silent together, not making a sound for a long time. "Andy is dead," Gerda suddenly said. Garen's eyes widened suddenly. Gerda glanced at him, his expression unexpectedly calm. "He died because of me." Garen didn't know what to say. He didn't know what happened during this period, but Andy died. Gerda smiled. "A few days ago, our monsters had another close combat. Andy rushed out of the monster group alone and failed to come back." "Why?" Garen asked in a low voice. He couldn't understand what was happening. "Is it because of Illilan?" "Illiran? He's dead too," Gerda said calmly, as if he was telling the story of an unrelated person. "I thought he would be a very good friend of mine. Actually, I don't know what happened. I just feel like everything has changed as soon as I wake up." Gerda's face was very white. "When I was a child, I was stupid and strong, but I always lost in fights. I was often beaten until my nose was bruised and my face was swollen. Also slow to react and simple in thinking. Many times, my dream is actually very simple. I just want my mother to be recognized by the family and my father." Garen looked at him without speaking. He suddenly had an ominous premonition. Gerda smiled. "I'm old-fashioned, I don't know how to dress up, I have a one-sided personality, and I always like to giggle and daydream. I never thought that some girl would fall in love with me in the future. Even I look down on myself. I didn't expect, there are still girls who like me." His smile was cold, as if there was a touch of sadness in it. "I'm really naive. I thought that a girl really liked me. I'm so stupid, not handsome, and have no money or power, haha." He stood up and looked out the window. "Have you seen the crowd outside? I'm afraid they don't know that my father, the Grand Duke of White Dragon Eagle, has lost the heart of Dragon Shadow. He has lost the most powerful magical secret treasure." "How do you know?" Garen's heart sank. Because I took it, Gerda replied calmly. Garen, I have nothing left. Really, nothing. You still have my friend. Garen stood up and replied in a low voice. Friend, Gerda turned around and laughed. Suddenly he turned and stared at Garen. Then can you tell me how the light of the silver totem on your body came from? The totem master of the Black Sky Society. Garen opened his eyes wide, and for a moment he didn't expect Gerda's sudden words. He was stunned in place, not knowing how to answer for a moment. I have lost everything a long time ago. Gerda laughed miserably, took a few steps back, and accidentally bumped into the photo frame on the table. Call. The black shadow flashed, and he disappeared instantly, as if he had never appeared before. Garen stood there with a complicated and inexplicable look on his face. He quietly turned around and walked out of the house, only to see a black carriage parked in front of the house. A man in black was guarding the door with several totem masters. Can I spare you a few minutes? The man stepped forward seriously. Garen glanced at him and took a deep breath. Exactly, I also want to know what happened. You are Jessica and God Andy's friend, Mr. Gallon, right? The man confirmed unexpectedly. Do you have any clues about this case? Case? Clues? Gallon was startled. What case? You don't know, the man looked surprised. 10 minutes later, Garen put on his hood and felt an unspeakable feeling in his heart. Looking at the carriage gradually going away, he suddenly understood how Gerda got such ruthlessness in the end. The man was not very clear about the specific situation. He just knew that the superiors had asked him to monitor this place. As long as someone came into contact with Gerda, he had to come forward and ask about the situation. Galen was in a very complicated mood. Andy was actually dead, Jessica's whereabouts were unknown, Gerda seemed to be seriously injured, and he felt a sense of despair. Perhaps only they know what happened in the middle. But now that Gerda has left too, he can't find anyone to ask about the situation. Still confused. Judging from Goth's reaction just now, he can obviously recognize the light of my silver totem. Since he can recognize it, there must be other people who can recognize it. Garen thought for a while, and directly the black totem light on the body is put away, leaving only the totem light of the original totem. Walking slowly on the street, Garen kept analyzing Gerda's current whereabouts in his mind. He could not understand the meaning of Gerda's last words. There are obviously too many things included in it. Unknowingly, Garen arrived at the War Guild headquarters. Among the crowd at the entrance of the headquarters, a familiar figure was sitting on the steps. It's Angel, Try's Angel. She saw Garen approaching and immediately stood up. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Not bad, the shackles actually have additional effects. Let's talk after we go in. Garen was in a bad mood. The two squeezed their way into the guild through the crowd and sat down in a lonely corner. What specific plans do you have? Angel asked in a low voice as soon as he sat down, at a volume that only Garen could hear. The situation is obviously not good now. I have arranged an underground passage to leave through a secret passage in the guild. This place will soon become a paradise for monsters. Plan, Garen thought for a while. I've been out of town recently. Has anything major happened in the inner city? He asked in a low voice. Angel's attitude towards Garen has obviously changed a lot now, because the war shackles have an extra special effect, which gave her a good advantage in several battles. Now she has a greater sense of belonging to herself and Garen's shackles. A major matter? You mean, the matter of the commander-in-chief of the Duke's palace? Angel asked doubtfully. Tell me about it, Garen whispered. A commander of the Duke's palace, a guy named Gerda, his wife killed his mother, and it is said that he also took away an important thing from the Duke's palace. He is now wanted throughout the city. It is said that the situation inside it's very complicated. I only heard the introduction from a few acquaintances who were hired. Angel thought for a while and whispered. Garen felt a little uncomfortable. History had finally returned to its original path, and Gerda was finally forced to embark on this path. Andy, who was not supposed to die, died, and Jessica also disappeared. Did she kill Gerda's mother? Galen found it hard to imagine the circumstances under which Jessica would kill Gerda's mother. Is it silver control? Galen didn't know whether Gerda had confirmed whether Jessica had been silvered, but he knew that no matter whether he wanted to or not, Gerda would eventually have to take this path. Otherwise, there will be no way to survive in the entire Titan City. He wants to stop it, but the result of stopping it is likely to be the destruction of Titan City. This conflicting feeling was constantly tangled in Garen's mind. If this is the path that the strongest must walk, Garen lowered his head and sighed. By ignoring him all this time, he might have made a choice subconsciously. Did you really lose track of time this time? Garen asked himself this. What's wrong with you? Angel asked doubtfully. Do you know that Goth? He's my friend. Garen nodded. Okay, let's not talk about this. Where is your team? How is it developing? It's okay. We're currently defending a section of defense line in the south. Angel replied. How about it? Do you want to come with me? Forget it, I have other things to do. Garen shook his head, took out a prepared note and handed it to Angel. If you encounter trouble, you can escape here. Maybe you will get better. Remember, don't have too many people, no more than 5. Angel took it in confusion and looked at it. It turned out to be an address in an outer city. What are you doing mysteriously? Don't worry about it. Okay, that's it. Garen stood up. He had already heard the roar of the tide coming from outside. The roars and roars of countless monsters suddenly erupted in the sky. The final battle has begun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 322. After leaving the War Guild, Garen kept looking up at the changing battle situation in the sky. A large number of white dragon eagles and giant eagles were entangled with the monster beasts. From time to time, corpses fell from high altitudes, hitting the transparent shield heavily, and then rolled down. The streets were empty, most people had gone to the edge of the defensive perimeter, and only a few people remained in the center of the inner city. A melodious harp sound came from the right side of Galen. It was a middle-aged man with the vicissitudes of life, and he was devoted to playing the harp without an audience. Life is like water without foam, clear and contradictory. Why do people fight? I hear the cry of Titan City at night, and I hear the cry of monsters in the gray sky in the morning. Our blood is red, so heavy. Tears are colorless, so in a thin life, flowers of sin will bloom, and lilies of purity will bloom. Whether the beautiful ones will eventually wither, can you please tell me? The low voice of the bard echoed through the empty streets. Garen saw the tears on his face. In his breast pocket was a black golden 9 flower, which was a flower only worn at funerals. Walking in front of this man, Garen gently lowered his hood. In a large and deserted white palace in the city. In the middle of the empty hall, there is a pyramid-shaped hero's memorial tower. The body of the tower is pure white, with a large number of black names engraved on it, densely packed. These are the totem masters who died in the war. There were several figures in black standing in front of the tower. One of them was a young man. He raised his head and looked at the pyramid quietly, his face was silent and he didn't know what he was thinking. Totem masters who died in the war will be buried here in the Pagoda of Comforting Souls. Carve your names on it. An old man walked up to the tower and whispered. Isaiah, I hope you can live a better life in heaven and no longer suffer as much as on earth. With a sad look on his face, he grabbed a handful of comfort sand and sprinkled it gently on the pyramid. Black sand fell on the tower, making a rustling sound. Garen also grabbed a handful of sand from the sand tray and scattered it gently. The direction of Tarsar is exactly a familiar name below the pyramid. Andy Cruz. I hope you will be happy in heaven, he murmured in a low voice, saying the same blessing. Perhaps it has been silent for too long and I have almost forgotten the courage I once had. Garin spread his hands and quietly looked at the bloody palms that killed countless people. Time will always wear away the will of human beings, even me. But maybe it's not too late now. He looked through the pyramid and through the gap. He saw a few-year-old girl standing next to the opposite tower. She had long blonde hair and a baby-fat face, fair and delicate. The little girl also looked at him quietly. His eyes were empty and sad. One large and one small, the two looked at each other quietly. Garin suddenly smiled, turned around and strode away, the black cloak on his body rising slightly. Boom! A red halo of light exploded over the ruined city in an instant, blasting a large number of rubble walls into countless white ash. Goth looked at the blasted monster in front of him with an indifferent expression. This strange black bird that looked like an ostrich was killed by him the moment they met him. Behind him stood two men and a woman in white clothes and gold trim. The Wani flower is right ahead, be careful, Gerda warned in a low voice. You don't have to worry about it, the woman in white robe snorted coldly. If the higher UPS hadn't asked us to cooperate with you, I would have been able to complete the mission by myself. Stop it, Izagia, that incident was not Goth's fault, another man in white robe scolded. Goth showed no expression and just continued to move forward quickly. The two followed closely behind. The situation in the city has been at a stalemate for a long time. Elites must go out to deal with the monster army and strengthen the source of aura, Wani flower. It is a magical species spawned by Sami in the monster army, which can provide endless physical strength and endurance to the endless monster army. The three Goths were just one of several teams that went to deal with Wanihua. Gerda still recalled the previous meeting with his father in his mind. The tired father, who had never appeared in his memory, was stroking his head with a tired face. It's no big deal. You have to have confidence in your father. I am the White Dragon Eagle Grand Duke of Iron City. I can be neither humble nor arrogant even when facing the royal family. A heart of dragon shadow is nothing. Fight with peace of mind and don't be disturbed by other things. You are my son, and my purest blood is flowing in your body. The black domain bird is the proof of your blood. The Grand Duke looked at Goth with a trace of kindness in his eyes. With his stubborn and injured eyes, he seemed to see his former self. There are some things that you have to learn to forget. If you really can't forget them, just keep them as the belief in your heart. Gerda's eyes suddenly flashed with warmth. I still have a father, and he is the only one who will not lie to me. The Grand Duke's words were like a sharp sword, instantly piercing the haze and dark clouds in his heart. Thinking of this, Gerda speeded up his pace unconsciously. They came out of the secret passage and went directly to the outer city in order to relieve the pressure in the inner city. Woo! Suddenly, in the direction of the inner city, the sound of the dragon eagle's horn came from the sky surrounded by countless monsters. It's the dragon eagle horn. The decisive battle in the inner city has begun. It's the three-eyed black bear and the other three types of monsters that have appeared. Goth suddenly turned his head and looked towards the direction of the inner city. The red halo around him spread instantly, exploding all nearby monsters into balls of minced meat. Black and gray ink clouds floated over the inner city, surrounded by endless monsters. It's begun, the woman in white robe whispered. Let's go. We have to speed up, Gerda whispered. We will turn back immediately after destroying the Wani flower. Okay, the two men in white robes responded at the same time. They are all the strongest elite second-type totem masters in the city. Apart from the entangled third-type totem masters, they are the best implementers of this mission. However, the Type 3 totem masters are seriously short of combat power. There is already a shortage of manpower in the inner city, let alone freeing up manpower to complete additional tasks. They have more important tasks to do. In addition, Type 3 Totem Masters are too eye-catching, so all the elite Totem Masters of Type 2 were sent for this mission. The three of them quickly jumped between the grey-white city ruins, and a large number of monsters kept passing by them. Under the orders of the top 3 type monsters, these monsters all rushed towards the inner city, and they didn't even bother with little guys like them. At first glance, he would only fight if he collided head-on. The three of them were all very fast. They could deal with the troublesome ones in an instant, and avoid the troublesome ones directly. They were actually interspersed all the way to a collapsed city wall in the outer city. This is it, Gerda checked the contents of the mission memory and said affirmatively. Start the search. There should be a hidden beast here. Isagia is on alert. Without saying anything, the woman in white robe took out a short white staff, squatted down and thrust it into the ground. Laugh. A circle of transparent ripples spread out in all directions with her as the center. Several wolf-shaped beasts with transparent bodies were slowly illuminated by the ripples, and they were quietly trying to sneak up on the three people's backs. Isagia snorted coldly, and a ray of silver light suddenly flew out from behind, turning into a giant white eagle with a wingspan of more than 3 meters, and pounced on the surrounding transparent wolf-shaped beasts. Brown flames burned at the tip of the giant eagle's beak. When he opened his mouth slightly, a pillar of brown fire spurted out, suddenly igniting several wolf-shaped figures. These wolf forms rolled silently on the ground and struggled for a while before being completely burned to death, revealing charred corpses that are no longer invisible. The two Goths began to search around for places where the Wanyi flower might be hidden. Found it. Suddenly the man in white robe let out a cry of surprise. Gerda and others immediately approached and saw a delicate and beautiful black crystal flower shining in a square black transparent box under the rocks among the ruins. The flowers stand delicately and upright, with a black pearl-like bead in the center of the stamen. Wanyi flower. Destroy it quickly, Gerda said urgently. We only have 1 minute. Once we attack Wanihua's defense layer, we will definitely alert the Type 3 Totem Master. Let's work together and attack together. Well. The three of them put their hands on the black transparent box at the same time. Suddenly, a huge whine sounded from the sky above the inner city, like the cry of birds. Chirp. Like the cry of an eagle, it also sounds like a poignant nightingale. The sound spread far from the inner city to all directions. This is the cry of the Grand Duke's Dragon Eagle King, Isagia reacted immediately, with a look of anxiety on her face. Only when the dragon eagles are injured will they make this cry. We must rush back to help. ASAP. Gerda was also anxious. The three of them slid out a pale yellow scroll from their sleeves at the same time, with densely packed magic symbols engraved on it. Spells and spells, Isagia looked at Gerda. Dragon spirit flashes, Gerda shouted loudly. There was a crisp sound, and dazzling red arcs of electricity erupted from the scrolls of the three people at the same time. Amidst the crackling sound of electricity, the arc was instantly transmitted to the surface of the transparent black box. Gusts of wind blew in all directions. The red electric arc slowly turned into small red dragon eagles on the surface of the box, constantly swimming around. Click. The box soon showed signs of cracks. The black flower inside seemed to be gradually withering due to air leakage. It quickly changed from an upright posture to slowly bending at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon turned into a puddle of black ash. Let's go, Gerda shouted loudly, put away the scroll, and the three of them shot out in the direction they came from. Two giant white eagles grabbed two men in white robes and sped up. The black bird chirped softly and got into Goth, causing his speed to suddenly increase. The three people turned into three vertical lines, two white and one black, and galloped towards the inner city. Just in front of and to the right of where the three people were moving at high speed, there was a dark place in the shadows. How could I let you go back and ruin your good deeds? A sinister voice came from the shadows. Where is the black domain bird? Tisk tisk. If it can be integrated into the Grand Duke's White Dragon Eagle totem, it will be extremely powerful. I didn't expect to encounter a little surprise. 3 elite second type totem masters. Give it to my little darlings. Let's have some appetizers, hee hee. A figure in black robes walked out of the darkness. His green eyes stared at the running Gerda and others. The feet moved forward slowly, seemingly very slowly, but in fact they were very fast, walking directly in the direction of blocking Gerda and others. Suddenly his steps stopped abruptly. Who? He suddenly looked to the right. There was a slight change in his expression. War is a stage where lives collide and then bloom with the most dazzling light. A deep male voice came out of the darkness. He was dressed in a black robe, had short blonde hair, and his eyebrows were invisible, giving people an unusually cold and stern look. A sense of fierceness. Do you want to set your life on fire? You trash from the Black Sky Society. Garen pulled off his hood and narrowed his eyes slightly. In an instant, pairs of green wolf eyes appeared in the darkness around him. A large number of green wolf eyes surrounded him. Viewed from the sky, with Galen as the center and within hundreds of meters around, there were densely packed green-eyed giant wolves. Each of these giant wolves was filled with faint invisible force field fluctuations. All of them are Type 2 totems. The face of the man in black robe turned cold, and he stared at Garen, with green eyes pulsing. The 3 Goths quickly passed over the ruins. Suddenly, Goth seemed to feel the slightest strange fluctuations beside them. What is that? While moving at high speed, he glanced past him, but found nothing. What's wrong? The man in white robe asked loudly beside him. The giant eagle's wings above his head fanned out 2 streams of white air, directly tearing apart the 2 dead babies, blocking the way like giant hands. It seems like someone was there just now. Forget it, speed up. Gerda didn't think about it anymore. Good. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 323. Garen quietly stared at the man in black robe not far away. He is not one of Jace's men in this area. He had used the deducer to see information about all Jace's subordinates, but he was not among them. Buzz. In the distant sky of the inner city, a ball of black light was expanding, like an expanding fireball. The heaven and earth began to shake. The surface of the light ball continuously projects black light pillars downwards, and each light pillar accurately hits the totem masters in the inner city. Faintly, everyone can see the bird-like creature spreading its wings and singing inside the light ball. Slender black tail feathers, elegant wings, and a shining silver peacock crown. Buzz. The blackbird once again made a loud vibrating call. The black ball of light suddenly spread out in a circle of black ripples, knocking away all the approaching totem masters. Garen did not look back to see the terrifying attack of the black ball of light. He stared quietly at the green-eyed man in front of him. Jace's men don't have you, he suddenly said. The other party's green eyes suddenly jumped violently. Who are you? Eat him, White Dragon. Garen faintly uttered a few words. Boom. A giant white shadow suddenly landed and rushed towards the man in black robe. The petrified white dragon sprayed out a large amount of grey mist directly from its mouth, covering the entire area. The grey-white mist seemed to be alive, gathering in large numbers towards the black-robed man. As soon as the mist touched the ground, whether it was grass, stones, corpses, or bloodstains, everything was quickly petrified and turned into grey-white stone. A large number of green-eyed giant wolves rushed towards Garen in a crazy and fearless manner, but were completely enveloped in petrified grey mist in mid-air. They howled, and their bodies quickly turned into stone-grey matter, and they fell to the ground one by one. But it quickly turned into puddles of green liquid, which was not even solid. The man in black robe wanted to raise his hand, but was shocked to find that his movements were more than a little stiff. He tried hard to carve the spell in the air. Boom! A huge amount of grey-white petrified mist washed away where he stood. The man in black robe was instantly petrified into a humanoid statue. Garen turned his head and looked in the distance. The two-headed lizard dragon slowly emerged from the ground with its head holding a green-eyed giant wolf about the size of a calf in its mouth. The body of the giant wolf is drying up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Click. Click. The two-headed lizard dragon bit off the green-eyed giant wolf's body in one bite. At the same time, the petrified man in black robe also shattered into pieces. With a crash, it turned into a pile of meaningless rubble. Garen quietly looked at the stone corpses that were killed instantly. A totem master other than Jace, interesting. He turned around and looked at the sky in the inner city. The huge black light group was wildly shooting at the totem masters in the city. Several small white gold dots are constantly impacting around the light ball, but they can only wander around the periphery and be blocked back. Goth, I can only help you get here, Garen murmured and looked at the inner city. Don't die. He stood alone among the monsters, and countless monsters passed by him, but they did not attack him at all. As if they were rocks in the turbulent current, they passed through each other naturally. A huge black ball of light floats in the sky. The Grand Duke was wearing platinum armor and riding the platinum dragon Eagle King. He avoided the black ray beams shooting towards him at lightning speed. He held the huge golden dragon gun tightly and pointed the sharp spikes at the black ball of light. Laugh. A black beam of light passed by the side of his face, causing the light of his totem to oscillate. Are you okay, Red? A worried female voice came from the platinum dragon eagle beneath her. A huge silver wound had been scratched out on its abdomen, and silver blood was slowly dripping from it. It's okay. The golden hairband on the back of the Grand Duke's head was blown away, and his long golden hair flew back. It's been so many years, and I haven't fought with you for a long, long time. When I think of the time when we fought together, my heart is still filled with excitement. This opponent is far more difficult than any other battle. You and I may both die, the Platinum Dragon Eagle King said calmly, her silver eyes shining with humanity. It doesn't matter, I have wanted to go down with her for a long time. I just want to make it difficult for you, so I want you to accompany me. A trace of tenderness appeared on the face of the Grand Duke. The black light of the light ball shone on his face, as if giving him a layer of divine brilliance. Why are you and I talking about this? Your son has awakened the Black Domain bird. Why don't you let him temporarily fuse the totem with you, so that you will be more sure to deal with this opponent, the Platinum Dragon Eagle King whispered. Doubted. I have asked him to leave the core here, so that my family can retain a trace of blood. The Grand Duke was suddenly startled. He came down from the sky and felt a familiar breath approaching quickly. Didn't I ask him to leave here? He frowned for the first time. Suddenly he heard cheers coming from below. Black Territory Bird. It's Black Territory Bird. As long as you fuse with the Platinum Dragon Eagle King, you can create the most powerful King of Sky in the legend. We won't lose. Many of the totem masters below were knowledgeable people, and they immediately recognized the black bird with its wings spread below. As long as the Black Domain bird merges into the Dragon Eagle King, the strongest King of Sky in history will reappear, and he will definitely be able to deal with this strange bird in the sky by then. This is the consensus of everyone at this time. The dozen or so remaining Type 3 totem masters all stared closely at the Black Domain bird carrying Goth. The giant black bird flapped its wings and rushed towards the Dragon Eagle King, its eyes also filled with black beating flames. This is the last hope for all those who are suppressed by the ball of light. The Black Domain bird and the Dragon Eagle King kept dodging and getting closer among the large number of black beams. The Grand Duke looked helplessly at his son on the Black Domain bird's back. You shouldn't have come back. He deliberately asked her to go out of the city and away from the core, just to prevent her from coming back for a short time. Unexpectedly, he has always felt guilty for this mother and son. The once gentle female totem master has been silently supporting himself behind his back. Unfortunately, it's too late to wake up now. She died too. Now, Now, he only has his son. Looking at Gerda, who was looking at him firmly, he suddenly felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. The black domain bird vibrated its wings, suddenly accelerated, dodged a black light that shot towards it, and rushed towards the Dragon Eagle King. Puff! In an instant, a golden thread suddenly spurted out from the black domain bird's mouth. The golden thread pierced the Dragon Eagle King's injured abdomen in the blink of an eye, and with a sneer, penetrated through the back. The sky seemed to become silent for a moment. Everyone was stunned. Silver blood dripped heavily from the Dragon Eagle King's abdomen. No one could have guessed what was happening. The smile on Gerda's face froze, and his eyes widened, filled with disbelief and despair. He shook his head, his lips were bitten and bleeding, and he had a look of bewilderment on his face. No, no, it's not me. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this, he kept shaking his head, sitting on the black bird, and the despair in his eyes was so rich that it was almost crazy. The golden wire bent, and with a hiss, it directly pierced the Grand Duke's armor and his left chest and heart. No, Gerda's desperate roar came to his ears. The Grand Duke lowered his head in astonishment and looked at the golden thread on his left chest. His face went from surprise and pain to confusion, relief, and calm. He spit out a mouthful of blood involuntarily. The core defense of totem light will be cancelled only when it fuses. You really calculated it accurately. He seemed to have understood something. Red, I didn't expect that we would really die together this time. The Dragon Eagle King smiled bitterly with some difficulty. The Grand Duke also smiled bitterly. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, slowly turned his head, and looked down at Gerda, whose face was full of tears. This simple action seemed extremely difficult for him. Don't cry, I've lived a wonderful life. It's not your fault. He raised his head, his face full of calm. Life is like a play, with ups and downs, highs and lows. I just reached the ending I deserved. Father Goth sat on the black domain bird. He was completely unable to control his body. He couldn't help but grab the golden thread and swung it hard. The tip of the golden thread came out again and pierced the Grand Duke's heart again. Laugh. Gerda's face was filled with tears. He didn't know what he was doing. An unimaginably huge force controlled him, causing him to do such completely incomprehensible things. The Grand Duke smiled, his face quickly turning pale. He glanced at the strange bird light ball directly in front of him that was condensing an unprecedented black light. The overwhelming sense of threat could break out at any time. Goth, don't blame your mother. If possible, please protect the Iron City of the Dragon Eagle family for me. Before he finished speaking, he waved his hand fiercely. An invisible huge force field suddenly spread out. Directly exclude Goth. It flew towards the Duke's palace, the core of the inner city. The Grand Duke faced the black light that was about to erupt, and a strong burning fighting spirit suddenly appeared in his eyes. Come on, Anna. Let my subjects see the true glory of my Dragon Eagle family. As you wish, Dragon Eagle King's soft voice resounded throughout the sky. The sky roars. In an instant, a golden ball of dazzling light quickly appeared in the sky, hanging high like the black ball of light. A large black golden arc was violently intertwined between the two light balls, and countless crackling sounds of electricity could be heard. At this time, the totem masters had been involuntarily pushed down to low altitude or the ground by the huge force field. No one expected this outcome. The two light balls quickly attracted each other like magnets. Then there was a silent collision. Goth was suddenly shot into the pond of the Duke's palace. He and the black domain bird were all numb all of a sudden, unable to get up and move at all. I could only stare blankly at the golden ball of light shining in the sky. Tears streamed down his face and he tried to open his mouth, but no words came out. A dazzling white light suddenly shone in the sky. Boom! A set of golden armor suddenly landed in front of Gerda, firmly embedded into the grey-white stone floor. That is the legendary armor of the Grand Duke, and it is also a secret treasure passed down from generation to generation of the white dragon eagle family. The left chest that was pierced by the gold thread just now was intact. After a long time, the light dissipated, and the stiffness on Gerda's body gradually disappeared. He walked out of the pond, covered his face with his hands, and knelt down in front of the armor silently.